Billions of us use Meta's platforms every single day. But have you ever stopped to think about how the really big decisions get made inside a company that massive? Well, today, we're going to crack open Meta's official rulebook, its 2025 proxy statement, to get a real look at the power dynamics, the big fights happening behind the scenes, and of course, where the money's.
So let's just get right to it. Who is actually calling the shots at Facebook and Instagram? Is it the thousands of shareholders, an independent board of directors, or is it somebody else entirely? That's really the central mystery we're going to solve today.
Now, the document we're pulling all this from isn't some secret leaked file. It's a public document called a proxy statement. But don't let that boring name fool you. Seriously, think of it less like a stuffy corporate report and more like the company's official playbook. It lays out the entire power structure for anyone who knows how to read it.
All right, let's dive in. First things first, we need to figure out who is actually in the driver's seat over at Meta. So, the secret to understanding power at Meta, it's not really in the boardroom. It's all about the stock. But here's the catch. Not all stock is created equal. See, most people, you and me, we can buy Class A stock. That gets you 1 vote per share. Simple enough. But then there's Class B stock, held by a very small group, and it comes with a massive 10 votes for every single share. Now, companies often say this is to help founders focus on the long-term vision, but as you're about to see, that 10-to-1 difference changes absolutely everything.
So let's put some numbers to this. If you look at the economic stake, the actual ownership of the company, Mark Zuckerberg owns about 14% of the shares. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a huge amount of money, but it's still just a slice of the pie. You'd think that means he has a minority say, right? Well, not quite.
And boom, this is where that special Class B stock kicks in. The second we stop looking at financial ownership and start looking at voting power, the whole picture just flips on its head. Thanks to those super voting shares, his 14% stake suddenly balloons into 61% of the total voting power. What that means in practice is that when shareholders vote, his vote is pretty much the only one that truly decides the outcome.
So you might be asking, what about the board of directors? Isn't it their job to provide oversight? And yeah, on paper it is. It's a 15-member team, and 14 of them are technically independent. Their role is to look out for all the shareholders. And it's a pretty heavy-hitting group too, with people like the CEOs of DoorDash and Dropbox, and even Dana White, the CEO of the UFC.
And this brings us right to the main event, the central conflict that you see play out in this document year after year. It's this constant tug-of-war between what outside investors want and what the company leadership, backed by the board, ends up doing.
You can see this tension perfectly in what are called shareholder proposals. Let's look at Proposal 6. This is a direct shot aimed right at the heart of that power imbalance we just talked about. Shareholders are basically saying, hey, let's get rid of this whole two-class stock system.
And the arguments are laid out right next to each other. The shareholders are saying this system makes management immune to accountability. And they've got backup. A massive 84% of the outside shareholders voted for this. But the board's response is basically, no, this structure is what lets us focus on long-term goals instead of getting pushed around by the market every quarter.
And to really hammer the point home, the shareholders dropped this bombshell of a quote from whistleblower Frances Haugen. It says, "There is no one currently holding Zuckerberg accountable but himself." Wow. I mean, that just perfectly sums up their entire argument about how the company is governed. But this fight isn't just about corporate structure. It's also about what happens on the platform itself. Proposal 8 brings the focus over to content moderation, demanding a special report on how Meta is fighting hate speech, especially anti-Semitism and anti-LGBTQ+ content.
So on one side, you have shareholders pointing to reports that call Meta's tools for reporting hate fundamentally broken. They argue this is bad for users and bad for business because it scares away advertisers. On the other side, Meta's board pushes back, saying, look, we have community standards, we have enforcement systems, we're handling it. A special report isn't necessary.
And, these debates over content moderation, they're really just one piece of a much, much bigger and, frankly, higher stakes issue for Meta. The safety of its youngest users and the very real financial price tag that comes with it.
This number, it kind of says it all. 42. That's how many U.S. states have banded together to sue Meta. The core of their argument? That the company's platforms use addictive features that they know are harmful to the mental health of kids and teens.
And these risks, they aren't just theoretical. This is a record-breaking fine of 1.2 billion euros. That's what the European Union hit Meta with for breaking its data privacy rules, known as GDPR. So yeah, regulators are paying very close attention, and their actions have huge financial teeth.
At the heart of all these lawsuits and fines is a really disturbing list of alleged harms to children. The proposals detail things like sextortion and grooming, cyberbullying, exposure to violent content, and the negative impacts on self-image that can lead to depression and anxiety.
So what's Meta's side of the story? Well, in the proxy statement, they lay out their defense pretty clearly. They say they've built over 50 tools just to support teens. They've rolled out new features, like one that automatically blurs sensitive images in DMs. They've partnered with outside groups on safety tools. They frame their whole strategy with this three-pronged approach: prevent, control, and respond.
Okay, so how do we tie all of this together? How does that crazy power structure we saw at the very beginning actually play out in the real world? Well, one of the best ways to see it is to just follow the money, specifically how the top executives get paid.
Let's start with Mark Zuckerberg's official salary. For years now, it's been the classic tech CEO move, a purely symbolic $1.
But that $1 salary, yeah, that is not the full story. Not even close. For 2024, the board approved an annual pre-tax allowance of $14 million. And what's that for? His personal and family security.
And get this, even that massive number doesn't cover the whole thing. The document is careful to note that this $14 million is in addition to over $13 million spent on other security costs, which includes things like private jets. The company justifies this by saying it's a necessary cost because of the specific threats he faces as the public face of Meta.
And that really brings us right back to where we started. When you read through Meta's official playbook, you see this one tension over and over again. You have shareholders, and they're using their voice. They are loudly protesting everything from the corporate power structure to content policies. But it all leaves us with this one big, fundamental question about how companies like this work. When one person ultimately has the final say, what does all that feedback from everyone else truly mean?